You know, what was really interesting about living and growing up where I did was I was surrounded by businesses and business people, and I've always had a love for business and entrepreneurialism and multiple streams of income. And you know, I got that entrepreneurial spirit really from one of my grandfathers. One of my grandfathers lived in Colorado, a little town called Fowler. You know, my grandfather was a big entrepreneur in terms of having tons of multiple streams of income. That was his belief. And because he grew up in the Depression, he was a collector of everything. And his viewpoint was, if I can collect it and I can find somebody to buy it, we make some money. So my grandfather, we were out there on a family vacation. My grandfather put me on this tractor, and I remember we drove down this dirt road on this tractor, and we drove by a rental house on his property, and he said, I make income every time that guy pays me rent to stay there. And then we drove by his Model A and Model T Ford restoration garages where he restored old cars from the 20s and 30s. Every time somebody brings in a car and gets it fixed, I get a piece. Then we drove by his garage sale or antique store because we're in the Midwest. And so he had an antique store, and he's like, every time somebody buys something in there, I make some money. We then drove into his pasture that he owned the land for. We drove by his water wells, his gas wells, his oil wells, and we had to drive through thousands of head of cattle, all his. And he managed all of this stuff, and he shut the tractor down, and it was dead silence. And I could remember it like it happened 20 minutes ago. And he said, I want to teach you everything there is to know about business. I said, okay. He said, always give the customer way more value than they ever expect to receive, and everything else works itself out. So I remember the first sale I ever made with this new philosophy that he had instilled on me, give more value than ever expect to receive. Two little old ladies came to the antique store, and they came in, and they were looking around the store, and they came up with, they're actually called insulators. And I don't know if you know what an insulator is, but back in the old days, they sat on the top of electric and phone wires, and they were those giant dense glass things where you strung wires around or whatever. So they bring two of these things up to the cash register. So I ring them up on this big, cool old antique cash register, and $2. And I look over my grandfather, and he's got one eyebrow raised, and he's looking at me kind of weird. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm missing a lesson here because I'm just going to give these things off. So I'm like, okay, maybe more value, what does that mean? So I wrapped him up in newspaper. Look over, he's still looking at me weird. So I'm like, okay, well, now what? So I went, I got a coffee tin or a cookie tin, and I put them in the thing wrapped in newspaper in this tin. I looked at him, and he's still looking at me funny. I'm like, what? So I took that, and then I wrapped it in bubble wrap. Well, then I took that, and I put it in a bag. And I'm sitting ready to hand it over. Ladies gave me $2. And he's still looking at me kind of weird, but I could tell that I'm not totally getting what he's talking about. Walked these ladies out, and I remember opening the door for the driver of the car, and she got in. She was like, oh, thank you, called me a whippersnapper, pulled my cheeks or whatever. I walked around to the back, and I thought, you know what? I've gone to this much length for these stupid pieces of glass that aren't gonna break anyways. So I opened up the back seat of the car, and I actually put the bag in, and I seat belted the bag in the back seat. And I said, this is for safe travels. Well, by the time I got back over to open the door for the other lady on the passenger side, she had taken out a $20 bill and gave me a $20 tip for taking such good care of these insulators. And I have to tell you that at that second, I got it. Give more value than ever expect to receive, and everything else works out okay. So my first lesson with that was on a $2 purchase. I made 10 times the profit for nothing more than being nice. And that philosophy has really carried me throughout my entire career. And so I've been buying, selling, and building companies. I speak all around the world, and I may not sell as much as some of the other guys, but for me, it's always about the core philosophy of giving more value than customers ever expect to receive, and everything else will be okay.